Hello, beautiful people. I am just hoping that you all are safe and that your families are safe. I know that this is not um, something that we could have ever anticipated happening, but I want to do my part to make sure that if you would like the additional support or the additional resources, that I am providing them by any means necessary. So I know we were working on different things in our different grade levels. Unfortunately, I do not have the capacity to record, edit, and get all of those different things out to you guys. So I will be consolidating when and if I see fit. So today's lesson is a group lesson for the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade class. Some of what I'm going to cover today, you may already know, or I may have already discussed. Can't hurt to have a little bit of a refresher. Hopefully, I present it to you in a new and different way. Um, I want to make sure to highlight that I'm including my email address. So if you feel like you want to follow up with me or just need to chat because you're feeling like you want to get some things off your chest about what's going on, you can certainly do that. I will do my absolute best to get back to everyone who reaches out to me as quickly as possible. And I also just want to say that I appreciate you if you are listening to this, because it shows me that you are also keeping in mind your future. We will not always be living in the times that we are living in right now. So kudos to you for taking the initiative to participate in your upward bound classes in this way. I am super proud of you all. So switching gears from my early, kind of introductory message, today's lesson will just be me voice recording over a PowerPoint. I'm doing it this way because it's much faster to get this material out to you in that way than to try to do a video, because we get all nitpicky and want things to be perfect. So rather than kind of fight with my technology to try to make sure the lighting is right and the timing is right, I'm just going to do a voice recording for this first lesson, just to make sure that you have an option to kind of test out your materials and not miss out on anything. So today we are going to be talking about symbolism, and we are only going to touch a little tiny itty teensy bit on how to begin to interpret a piece of literature. There will be some things I want to talk to you about at the end of this lesson, so please stay tuned for that. I know you can't see me, but I'm doing like lots of Vanna White stuff over here, okay? Like, use your imagination. I'm pretty lively in class. So before we start, it is really important that we define symbolism. We can see in the word and we can hear in the word symbol, which we all should have an idea about what it means. But symbolism is a noun, and it happens when things or people or items are used to represent an idea that could be intangible. And what do I mean by intangible? I mean something that you may not be able to touch, pick up, hold, cradle, point at, see. So things that are intangible, you can't really feel. Think of it like a ghost or a spirit would be intangible. You can't feel it, you can't grab it, right? It's kind of just this entity there. We already know some symbolisms. We see them every day, we use them every day. So a heart or a rose is a symbol of love. Oh, sweet, right? We know this. We know that a heart, when you put it around someone's name, means that you love them. If you give someone a rose, it's supposed to signify that you care for them, specifically a red rose. And we'll talk a little bit about color in just a moment. Another symbol that you might be familiar with is the dove. So doves represent or is a symbol of peace, right? Yes, that is a dove. If you've never seen one, think of like a white pigeon. I know it's really hard to imagine our crusty Philly pigeons as white, but that's the closest thing I could get you to imagine a dove. But those two symbols are something that we know or have heard of vaguely. And again, these symbols represent an idea, right, of something, an idea or a quality. So to activate a little bit more of your knowledge, you may have heard that the American flag represents freedom. When people see the flag, they think freedom. Freedom is that intangible idea. You can't touch freedom. You can't, pick it up and hold it. It's a thought. It's an idea. But the physical flag represents that thought or idea. Okay? Now, darkness, or, maybe the color black, that can typically represent something. And hopefully you would say, what does it represent? Evil or death, something bad, right? Darkness usually represents something bad. When you think about watching a horror film, they make it very dark and moody, right? Or if you think about watching a show, the characters that are usually up to no good are lurking in the darkness, or wearing dark colors. You never hear about the superheroes lurking in the dark. Okay, maybe Batman, but special circumstance, okay? Yeah, like, don't at me, okay? Well, you can't because I ain't got no social media. Anyway, butterflies. If you have ever done this experiment in your school where you take a little caterpillar and they build their little cocoon and then they emerge from the cocoon as a beautiful butterfly, and your teacher talks about transformation and change. That is what a butterfly would represent, something that has turned into something else or changed into something else, usually for the better. Okay, so when people think about getting those butterfly tattoos, it's like, I've become a new person and I have a new outlook on life. I'm not mocking those people. I'm just saying that these are some common symbolisms and representations that we may have run into throughout our lives. Okay? But let's not get it twisted. There is the inclination to confuse signs with symbols. This is a stop sign, right? You see that stop sign. That stop sign is communicating a message to you. It's telling you halt, cease, desist, do not go. All right? It's communicating a message to you for a reason. Maybe there's danger up ahead. Maybe you need to look to make sure there is no danger. Symbolisms or symbols are not necessarily communicating a message so much as they are representing the idea of something else. So this heart is representing the idea of love. It's not communicating love to you. If you see a heart, you're not thinking that heart is telling me to do something. You're probably going to say in your head, in your inner voice, that heart represents love, or that rose represents love. So do not conflate signs and symbols. They are not the same thing. Okay? I know that's really hard to kind of differentiate, but as we begin to practice more with identifying symbols and interpreting their meaning, hopefully you'll be able to better understand why signs and symbols are different. So let's explore a little bit more. Okay, I'm always an advocate of diving a little deeper, trying to get you to practice and identify. So that's what we're going to do here today. It's going to look a little different. One, because I'm not there with you, so that's a little hard, but we are managing. We are going to do some guided practice, and much of that will be me speaking to myself in my empty office space, and hopefully you're listening. But then you'll have a chance to do some independent practice, and then there's a little bonus thing at the end, but we'll get into that later, okay? That's later. All right. How do you even know if something in a text is a symbol? All right, Teacher Latoyia, you just said signs and symbols are different. It's really easy to spot a sign. How will I know that I'm spotting a symbol when I'm reading a poem, a short story, a play, etc.? Well, first things first, sometimes symbols are really basic items, all right? They're everyday things that are given great meaning in a story or ones that are described in great detail. If you've ever read a piece of fiction and you're reading along and suddenly the author spends a ridiculous amount of time describing this one thing that seems so insignificant, it's probably because he or she would like you to pay attention to that object because it will become important or represent something later on down the line. Now, I want to make a note. Just because an author describes something in detail does not mean that it will be a symbol. All right? Authors need to describe stuff because they have to help us visualize what's happening. So how else can we know if it's a symbol? Well, that object will show up frequently. So not only do the thing that is being described with great detail, but it's also coming up a lot. So if I'm talking about this one blanket and this blanket just keeps showing up in the story, maybe the author is trying to point our attention to that blanket because it means something else or supposed to represent something else. I've been talking a lot about things, a lot about items, but symbols can be people. People can serve as representations. Their qualities, their traits can serve as representations for other abstract ideas or concepts. And colors and sounds can also be symbols in a text. All right, so I don't want us to get stuck on the idea that if it's not a thing, like a pen or a blanket or a computer or a lamp or a candle or a bird or a flag, if it's not a thing, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not a symbol. All right. So you have to really broaden your idea of what a symbol can be, and really kind of pay attention to the small details in a story so that you know whether or not an author is trying to communicate another message to you. Okay. I know it's kind of hard, but maybe if we practice, let's you know what? Let's do a little. All right, guided practice. Duh, we just said that. If this was a YouTube video, this is totally a side note. I'm sure I would be so lively and so full of antics, just like I am in class. So imagine me doing all the things in class as I am doing here. That's what I'm doing. Okay. All right. Anywho, we just talked about colors possibly being symbols and how personality and character traits can also be representations of other ideas from people. Here is a great example that I found online. It's not the end all be all. Of course, there are many more colors and many more nuances, but something that I really want to point your attention to is black, right? We talked about black being evil or something bad, but on the opposite side of that, we have white. Look at that little angel there, something innocent, something pure. We've talked about red, the color of that heart, meaning love or excitement, but red can also mean anger, right? Depending on the context of the story. We've all heard the phrase green with envy. I believe Wicked is a good example. If anyone's seen Wicked, right? The color green meaning jealousy. You want something that other people have. Okay. So again, this color psychology here isn't the end all be all to symbolism or things representing other things. It's just kind of to get us thinking about trends we have seen in the stories that we've read. Maybe in a book you're reading right now or prior to all that has happened, you notice that a character was always wearing a certain color or always around certain types of people who were wearing a certain color. Or maybe in a movie you've noticed that things are always dark and gloomy and you were like, oh, what is going on here? And then you realize, oh, it's because the character we're about to see is evil, so they had to set the tone. A little bit more guided practice. We've seen this before. If you haven't seen The Lion King, this is probably the time to watch it. It's one of my favorite movies. I can never watch it without shedding a tear. You know the scene I'm talking about. I'm not going to spoil it for people who have yet to see it. But seriously, if you haven't watched The Lion King, and not the live action, I love me some Beyonce, but no, watch the animated version, okay? It's the best. Okay, anyway, let's take a look here. We just talked a little bit about colors and what they could represent. We also know that character traits can be symbolic of other things. What I plan to do in the next few minutes is just kind of walk us through these two characters. So on your left, you have Scar, right? We all know Scar. He looks a little dangerous, okay? A little bit, just a little. Okay, a lot dangerous. What do we notice about his color scheme? I paused for dramatic effect. Okay. So his mane, the hair that he has, is black. His eyes are green. He seems to be kind of muted out. He's a duller color than Mufasa, who is on the right. Even his teeth are not as white. It's almost as if Mufasa has a lot more light shown on him, even though this is from the same movie, if that makes sense. What else do we notice about Scar, who is on the left-hand side? Well, something that I notice is that his facial features and his body, recalling from watching the movie, is very angular. And when I mean angular, I mean sharp, pointy. Look at his little scruff from his mouth. It almost comes down to a point, like a triangle. Sharp. Sharp things usually hurt you. Okay? Even his nose, pointy. His eyes look a little bit more pointy. The peak on his mane up here looks pointy, angular. His body is very thin. Okay? Now, if we contrast that with Mufasa, again, his color scheme, very light. He has that yellow orange, right? Those warm colors. And the features that he has are much more rounded. Rounded things are soft. So if you had to decide, if you were a little kid watching this movie and you needed to figure out who the quote good characters are and who the quote bad characters are, Disney has done an excellent job to help small children be able to differentiate between those two. If they were just looking at them, maybe they didn't hear it. If just looking at them, you can see who is supposed to be a character that is negative and who is supposed to be a character that is positive. So these things show up in the stories that we read. They show up in the poems that we read. They show up in the movies that we watch, in the music that we listen to, or the music videos that we watch. There are a lot of different ways that people play around with symbolism, because sometimes you can't just come flat out and say what you want to say, because that doesn't make for an interesting story. There need to be layers to a story. All right, back to mother to son. So I am going to read this poem. It's going to be a rather quick read so I can keep this recording as short as possible. So this poem is by Langston Hughes. If you do not know the author, I highly recommend that you look him up. Great poet, great author. Love, love, love. So mother to son. And remember, you are looking to identify the 4 questions on the screen. Well, son, I'll tell you. Life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It had tacks in it and splinters and boards torn up and places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time, I's been climbing on and reaching landins and turning corners and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you set down on the steps 'cause you finds it kinda hard. Don't you fall now, for I's still going on, honey. I's still climbing. And life for me ain't been no crystal stair. I tried to read that with some emphasis. I'm not sure if it came through, but I think that you guys definitely can hear some of the answers to the questions that I've posed. So on that note, I'm actually going to end this recording. Again, please stay safe, be kind, and I hope to see you all soon. Have a beautiful day, beautiful people.